Hey everyone! Welcome back to the English Medium Podcast, where we slow things down a little and make English feel less like homework and more like a real conversation you can follow, repeat, and actually enjoy without stress.
Yeah, exactly. No pop quiz, no pressure, no dramatic background music. Just two voices hanging out and talking about something very normal, very human, and honestly, a little bit scary in a modern way.
Today's idea sounds simple, but it hits hard. What happens if you spend one full day without your phone? No checking, no scrolling, no emergency tapping the screen every few minutes just because your hands got bored.
And before anyone panics, no, we are not saying phones are evil. We're not coming in with a giant lecture and a wagging finger. We're just asking a question that most of us avoid because the answer might be uncomfortable.
Exactly. This is not a punishment episode. It's more like a quiet experiment, a little observation of what your mind does when the loudest object in your pocket suddenly disappears.
Which, by the way, sounds easy until you actually picture it. Then your brain starts doing that tiny nervous laugh like, yeah, sure, one day, with no phone, totally normal, no problem at all.
So, as you listen, don't worry about memorizing every sentence. Just imagine the day with us. Walk through it slowly. Feel the awkwardness, the silence, the weird little gaps where your phone usually lives.
And if some of these feelings sound familiar, that's the point. We're not talking about a faraway lifestyle. We're talking about the thing most people reach for before they even fully wake up in the morning.
All right, then. Let's begin at the moment before the challenge starts, because the decision itself already changes the mood. Once you say no phone tomorrow, your whole evening begins to feel slightly different.
Yeah, the mind starts bargaining right away. It says, okay, maybe just one last check, one last video, one last message, one last everything. Because apparently last things are very persuasive when you are tired.
So imagine you put the phone far away from your bed, not beside the pillow, not on the nightstand, not within that easy, lazy hand reach where you can grab it before your brain even remembers your name.
That already sounds painful. I can feel my thumb getting anxious just listening to it. The phone is like a tiny habit machine, and once it is out of reach, the room feels bigger and somehow emptier at the same time.
And that empty feeling is important because it shows how much space the phone takes up in our minds before it even takes up space in our hands. We think we are only using it for information, but we are also using it for comfort.
Right, and comfort is the tricky part. Because when something gives comfort fast, the brain starts treating it like a reflex. You do not choose it anymore. You just drift toward it, the way a hand drifts toward warm sunlight.
Then the night ends, and morning arrives. The first test is tiny, but it says a lot. Your eyes open, your body wakes up, and the hand reaches automatically for the place where the phone should be.
And there it is. Nothing. Just air, maybe a blanket corner, maybe the sound of your own breathing. That second of confusion is so small, but it can feel huge because the habit is louder than the room.
Your brain goes, wait, where is it? What time is it? Who messaged me? What did I miss? Did anything happen? Is the world already moving without me? That chain reaction happens ridiculously fast.
It really does. And the funny part is that nothing bad has happened yet. The panic is already there before reality even has a chance to be difficult. The absence of the phone creates its own little weather system in your head.
So now you have a choice. You can stay in bed and negotiate with yourself, or you can get up and meet the day without that familiar screen glow. And honestly, that choice can feel bigger than it should.
Because the phone usually acts like a bridge. It connects the sleepy version of you to the moving version of you. Without it, there is a tiny gap, and you have to cross that gap with your own thoughts.
Which means you might actually notice the room, the fan, the light under the curtains, the quiet sound of the street outside. Not dramatic stuff, just reality, being there, waiting politely while you wake up.
That sounds poetic until your brain remembers responsibility. Then it goes, okay, but also emails, messages, weather, calendar, alarm, news, directions, reminders, and 100 other tiny digital excuses to keep staring at a screen.
Exactly. The phone is not just one thing anymore. It is a schedule, a map, a list, a camera, a notebook, a music player, a messenger, and a little pocket-sized place where your attention gets divided into pieces.
So, let's say you make it out of bed, you stand up, stretch, maybe even feel brave for a second. Then you walk toward the kitchen, and suddenly the morning routine changes shape because your hands are empty.
Normally, breakfast is paired with some kind of screen. A video, a notification, a quick scroll, a weather check, a message reply. But today, the routine has to exist by itself, without digital seasoning on top.
That sounds weirdly serious, but I get it. Even making tea can feel different when there is no little glowing rectangle interrupting you every 30 seconds. The kettle hums, the water boils, and you're just there.
And being just there is harder than it sounds. In the silence, thoughts rise up. Not magical thoughts, not perfect thoughts, just ordinary ones. What should I do today? Why am I tired? Did I forget something?
And those thoughts are exactly why people reach for the phone so fast. The phone is not only entertainment. Sometimes it is a very efficient escape hatch from whatever the mind wants to bring up first.
Yes, and that is why the no phone morning feels so honest. There is no immediate distraction to cover the noise inside your head. You get a clear look at your own attention, and that can be uncomfortable, but also useful.
Useful is a good word. It means the discomfort is not pointless. It is showing you where your habits live. It is showing you how quickly you try to fill empty space instead of letting the space exist for a moment.
Maybe you sit by the window with your coffee. Maybe you stare at the table. Maybe you notice the pattern on the mug, the sound of a spoon, the shape of morning light across the floor. Tiny details suddenly feel louder.
And here is the strange part. When you stop feeding your brain constant updates, it starts feeding you observations instead. You begin noticing things that were always present but never important enough to survive the scroll.
That is a beautiful way to put it. The morning becomes less about consuming and more about noticing. Less input, more awareness. Less reaction, more presence. It is awkward at first, but it can also feel like breathing.
Still, I would not pretend it is all peaceful. There is a real itch there. You keep thinking, I could just check one thing, just one little thing, and nobody would know. That voice is very persuasive.
It is. And the phrase, just one thing, is suspiciously powerful because it almost never stays one thing. One notification becomes 5 minutes, 5 minutes becomes 20, and suddenly your morning has dissolved into fragments.
That is the trap. Not because the phone is bad by nature, but because it is designed to catch attention quickly and hold it tightly. Convenience is wonderful right up until it starts steering your whole morning.
So, after breakfast, you get dressed and prepare to leave the house. This is where the day starts to feel real, because leaving without a phone can feel like leaving without your wallet or keys, even when you know you're fine.
Exactly. Your pocket feels wrong. Your bag feels incomplete. Your hand keeps checking the same empty place as if the phone might magically reappear just because you looked disappointed enough.
And then you ask yourself a funny question. What am I actually afraid of? Missing a message? Missing directions? Missing the ability to be distracted? Sometimes the answer is less about urgency and more about habit.
Yeah, and that is a hard thing to admit. We like to think we're staying connected for practical reasons, but part of the time we're staying connected because it is easier than sitting with uncertainty or boredom.
So you step outside. The air feels different. The street looks different. Not because the world changed, but because your eyes are not half closed over a screen. You are actually taking in the scene in front of you.
And that tiny shift changes everything. Suddenly, the walk to the bus or train or car becomes an experience instead of a transition. You notice the sky, the traffic, the sound of shoes on pavement, the rhythm of other people.
The funny thing is, without a phone, even waiting becomes visible. A red light becomes a real pause. A queue becomes a room full of people. A minute feels longer, but maybe also more honest.
Maybe more honest. Yes, because there is no fake sense of speed created by refreshing a feed. Time is just time again. A little slower, a little heavier, and strangely easier to remember later.
Then comes the elevator moment, which sounds small, but says so much about modern behavior. The elevator is a place where people usually hide in their screens, avoiding eye contact as if silence were dangerous.
Oh, absolutely. Elevators are basically tiny social laboratories. Everyone pretends not to be awkward by becoming extremely interested in the screen they already know they are about to open for no reason.
Without the phone, though, you are forced to occupy the space differently. You might look at the numbers changing. You might notice the other person's shoes, their coat, the expression on their face.
That sounds like a crime now, which is wild. Just noticing people used to be normal. Now we act like a moment of eye contact is some kind of emergency. But then, sometimes, someone smiles first.
And that changes the whole elevator. It becomes less like a box of strangers and more like a brief shared moment. Nothing dramatic, just two human beings existing in the same small space without escaping immediately.
That is the whole theme, really. Escaping less, observing more, maybe even letting awkwardness stay for a second instead of deleting it with a thumb swipe, which, honestly, is not easy for anybody.
Once you reach the street, the outside world opens up. There are signs, voices, buses, bicycles, shop windows, trees, dogs, bags, traffic lights, and all the little pieces of life that pass by when your gaze is elsewhere.
And some of them are surprisingly beautiful. A child laughing at nothing, a person reading a paper book, a dog pulling its owner down the sidewalk like it has a very important appointment. Real life is weird and vivid.
It is. And a no-phone day makes that vividness harder to ignore. You are not looking at life through someone else's editing choices. You are simply there, in the middle of it, with no filter except your own attention.
That is both freeing and a little scary. Freeing because you get your mind back. Scary because the mind may have opinions you have not heard in a while. It turns out silence can be full of information.
By the time you arrive at work or school or wherever the day is taking you, the challenge is no longer just about resisting the phone. It is about finding a way to be present without needing tiny interruptions every few minutes.
And that is where things get interesting. Because work without phone checking sounds noble in theory, but in real life, it means wading through awkward gaps, unfinished thoughts, and moments where your brain wants a shortcut.
Maybe you open your notebook instead. Maybe you write down tasks. Maybe you actually make a list by hand, and suddenly the task feels more real because you had to slow down enough to form each word.
That is something people forget. Writing things down manually can make them stick differently. Your brain has to cooperate. You're not just passing a command to a device and moving on. You are building a thought deliberately.
Without the phone, even simple focus can feel brighter. A document stays open longer. A conversation finishes more fully. A small problem gets solved without a detour into unrelated apps. The day becomes less fragmented.
Less fragmented is the dream, right? Because fragmentation is what makes us feel tired in a weird way. Not only busy, but scattered. Like the mind is open on 30 tabs and every tab is playing a different song.
Exactly. And on a no-phone day, those tabs cannot multiply as easily. You are forced to stay with one thing a little longer. That can be annoying, but it can also restore a kind of clean attention.
Of course, boredom shows up too. People talk about boredom like it is an enemy, but sometimes it is just the place where creativity starts stretching its legs. The phone often kills boredom too fast to learn anything from it.
That is such an important point. When boredom survives long enough, it can turn into observation, reflection, maybe even imagination. You start thinking of ideas that never had room to appear while your attention was constantly occupied.
And suddenly, the commute, the queue, the lunch break, the empty minute before a meeting, all of it becomes a chance to notice something instead of escaping it. That is where the day begins to feel different on the inside.
At lunch, the temptation gets strong again. Everyone around you is checking something, scrolling something, reading something, reacting to something. The room hums with invisible digital motion, even if nobody says a word.
Right, and that makes the no phone choice feel almost rebellious. You put your phone away and realize how often we use it as a social prop, too. It is not always about information. Sometimes it is about not knowing what to do with our hands.
So you sit with your food and actually taste it. That sounds tiny, but tasting lunch without distraction means you notice texture, salt, temperature, the pace of eating, the simple fact that you are nourishing yourself.
And maybe you notice the person across from you more clearly, too. Their expression, their tiredness, their jokes, their pauses. A real conversation starts when there is no emergency notification waiting to interrupt it.
That is where the phone can quietly change relationships. We think we are together, but part of us is always elsewhere. One eye on the person, one eye on the screen. One foot in the room, one foot in the feed.
That image hurts a little, but it is accurate. And when the phone is gone, the room gains weight. People feel more present. Awkward silences get a little longer, but the good kind of long, where something honest can happen.
You might even laugh more naturally because there is no content competing with the moment, no clip trying to be funnier than the person in front of you, just shared time, which is less flashy and maybe more valuable.
Then, of course, the afternoon slump arrives. This is usually when the phone acts like a rescue bar. You feel tired, your energy dips, your attention wobbles, and your hand starts hoping for a quick hit of stimulation.
But on the no-phone day, the slump has to be handled differently. Maybe you stretch. Maybe you walk. Maybe you drink water and stare out a window for a minute without immediately turning that minute into content.
Which sounds simple, but simple things can be surprisingly hard when you are used to instant entertainment. The mind asks, is this it? Are we seriously just standing here and breathing? And yes, sometimes that is enough.
Sometimes it is, because every gap does not need to be filled. That might be one of the hardest lessons here. We live like emptiness is a problem, when in fact, a little emptiness can be restorative.
Restorative and uncomfortable. Again, that combo keeps coming back. It is not pure bliss. It is not a magic productivity hack. It is a test of how much silence you can carry without immediately reaching for noise.
And maybe silence is not empty after all. Maybe it is just unedited. It contains the sounds of a room, the rhythm of your breath, the movement of people nearby, and the little thoughts you usually step over.
That is a nice way to put it. Unedited, because the phone gives us a constant edited layer on top of life. Without it, the raw version is more visible, and that can feel both honest and strangely beautiful.
Later in the day, someone asks for your number, or sends you a message, or tries to show you something, and you have that brief, awkward moment of saying, "I'm not checking today." That sentence feels huge.
Yeah, and people react in interesting ways. Some are impressed, some are confused, some laugh, but most of them understand immediately what you mean, because they know how much the device owns our attention.
And once you say it out loud, the challenge becomes real in a new way. It is no longer a private fantasy of discipline. It is a visible choice, and that makes it harder to sneak back into old habits.
Which is useful, because habits love privacy. They love those invisible little moments where nobody is watching and you can justify one quick check, one tiny scroll, one small escape from whatever is happening.
So you keep going. You answer what you need to answer with the tools available. You plan, you write, you talk. You notice the urge to grab the phone, and you let the urge pass like weather.
That phrase, "let the urge pass," is actually powerful. It reminds you that a craving is not a command. It rises, it peaks, it fades. If you can wait it out once, you learn that the world does not end.
By late afternoon, you may even feel a small sense of freedom. Not total freedom, not some grand enlightenment, just a small realization that you can survive the empty pocket longer than you expected.
And survival is the wrong word for a thing that might also be pleasant, because some parts of the day start to feel cleaner, less noisy, less tugged at. You can finish a thought without hearing 10 others beg for attention.
Exactly. The mind becomes less jumpy, not perfectly calm, not magically focused, but maybe more continuous. A thought begins, travels, and ends without being interrupted by a glowing emergency from 3 apps at once.
And that continuity can feel luxurious. Funny that we now think uninterrupted thought is a luxury, but here we are. It used to be the default. Now it feels like a special experience you have to protect.
On the way home, the city or town starts to feel more detailed again. You notice windows, voices, the shape of evening light, the way people move when they are tired, the way sidewalks hold the day's leftover energy.
Yeah, and the return trip often feels different because you are no longer only leaving work. You are leaving a full day of attention that did not vanish into constant checking. The day has shape. It has edges.
Maybe you stop for groceries and realize you can wait in line without reaching for your pocket. That sounds minor, but it is a real sign of how quickly we try to fill every microsecond with a screen.
And without the phone, those microseconds become visible. Waiting for bread, waiting for a bus, waiting for water to boil, waiting for a friend, waiting for dinner. Life is actually full of waiting.
True. And if we never let ourselves wait, we never learn what waiting does to us. Sometimes it frays us, sometimes it settles us, sometimes it simply reveals how impatient we have become with our own lives.
That is a big one. Impatience with our own lives. We think we are impatient with other people, traffic, slow apps, delayed replies, but often we are also impatient with the pace of being alive.
When you finally walk through your door at home, there is a small emotional shift. This is usually the time when people collapse onto the sofa and scroll to recover from the day. But tonight, the recovery looks different.
It might look quieter. You might take off your shoes and just stand there for a second. You might hear the house settling, the fridge humming, the soft sounds that usually get drowned out by videos and music.
And maybe you realize that home feels more like home when it is not always competing with a device. The room has its own personality again. The silence belongs to the space instead of being filled by someone else's content.
That is a beautiful sentence, and also a little heartbreaking. We let our spaces become containers for constant input, and then we wonder why we feel restless when nothing is playing.
So you make dinner, or maybe you reheat something simple. No recipe video, no timer app if you can manage it, just the sound of chopping, stirring, plates, and your own patience moving at the speed of the task.
Cooking without a phone can be weirdly grounding. You are forced to stay with the process. You smell the garlic, you notice the heat, you watch the color change. The task becomes real instead of just documented.
And because nothing is instantly shareable, the moment stays yours. You do not cook for the angle, the post, the reaction, or the proof. You cook because you are hungry and human, and the evening needs feeding.
That sounds almost old-fashioned, but maybe old-fashioned is not the insult we think it is. Maybe some old habits were actually better at teaching us patience, sequence, and presence than our shiny little habits now.
After dinner, the hardest part may arrive, the quiet evening stretch. This is the time when boredom gets soft and wide, and the phone usually steps in like a very reliable friend who never lets silence last too long.
Exactly. The evening is where many people reach for the screen with real affection, not because they need anything urgent, but because the day is ending and they want a soft landing, a little dopamine, a little distraction.
But without the phone, the landing is slower. You might read a book. You might fold laundry. You might look out the window and notice how dark it has become. The night arrives without a notification telling you so.
That is kind of poetic, actually. The night just arrives. No alert needed. And when you let it arrive on its own terms, it can feel calmer than a feed full of other people's highlighted moments and opinions.
You may also feel the urge to talk to someone more deeply because the absence of your device creates room for actual conversation. Not the kind interrupted by pings, but the kind that needs eye contact and patience.
And that kind of conversation can surprise you. You say one honest thing, then another, and suddenly the evening has more emotional weight than 100 little scrolls ever managed to create.
If you live with other people, they might notice a difference in your attention. If you live alone, you might notice a difference in your own mind. Either way, the room feels less divided.
Less divided is the real theme of the whole day. Divided attention is normal now, but it costs something. It costs depth. It costs memory. It costs the feeling that one moment has truly finished before the next begins.
And by the time you finally think about sleep, you may realize something strange. You are actually sleepy in a more natural way, not overstimulated, not buzzing, not half living inside 5 different apps at once.
That is one of the biggest surprises. The body knows what to do when the brain stops asking for constant updates. It settles, it slows, it remembers that the day was supposed to end somewhere.
Still, the old habit returns one last time. Before bed, the mind reaches for the phone out of reflex, and then remembers, no phone. The reflex lands nowhere. The hand hangs in the air for a second.
And that tiny second matters, because it shows the habit without letting it win. You see the motion clearly. You feel the absence clearly. The pause becomes a lesson instead of just a gap.
Maybe you write one note on paper before sleep. Maybe you jot down a thought, a task, a feeling, or just the simple sentence, "Today was harder than I expected, but I noticed more than usual."
That would be a good sentence, and it captures the whole experiment pretty well. Not perfect, not easy, but more noticeable, more honest, more alive in a way that is easy to forget when the screen is always there.
If you make it through the whole day, the victory is not about proving that you can live without technology forever. It is about realizing that you can choose attention instead of surrendering it automatically.
Yes, that is the important distinction. The phone is a tool, a useful one, but if we never stop to notice how often we reach for it, the tool slowly starts directing the owner instead of helping the owner.
And maybe that is the real reason this experiment matters. Not because you must delete your phone or reject modern life, but because you deserve to know what your mind feels like when it is not constantly interrupted.
Which is a pretty good goal for anyone learning English, too, by the way. If you can sit with a conversation, follow an idea, and stay present even when it feels a little slow, you are building real listening stamina.
That is such a nice connection. Because learning English is not only about vocabulary, it is about patience, attention, and comfort with uncertainty. A no-phone day trains the same muscles in a different way.
So maybe the question is not, can I survive a day without my phone? Maybe it is, what kind of person do I become when the noise goes quiet for long enough that I can hear myself think?
And that question is a little scary, yes, but also refreshing. Sometimes the answer is not dramatic at all. Sometimes it is just this: I am calmer than I thought, more distracted than I admitted, and more curious than I expected.
I like that. Calmer, distracted, curious. That sounds like most of us. And maybe the point is not to be perfect with attention, but to notice where it goes and gently bring it back when we want to.
So, if you ever try this challenge, do it kindly. Do not turn it into a punishment. Do not judge yourself for reaching for a pocket that is empty. Just notice, breathe, and continue the day.
Yeah, be nice to yourself. The habit is strong because it has been practiced a lot. One quiet day will not fix everything, but it can reveal a lot. And sometimes revelation is more useful than resolution.
That is beautifully said. Revelation before resolution. First see the pattern, then decide what you want to do with it. That feels much healthier than pretending the pattern does not exist.
And on that note, maybe the biggest lesson is simply that the world still looks interesting without the screen. People still smile, dogs still run, buses still arrive, coffee still tastes like coffee. Life keeps going.
It does. And when you are not looking down all the time, you remember that life is happening in front of you, beside you, around you, and sometimes even inside you, quietly waiting for your attention.
So, yeah, maybe that is the experiment. Not a perfect day, not a heroic performance, just a real day with a little less noise and a little more noticing.
And maybe that is enough for today. If this episode made you reflect on your own habits, even just a little, then we did our job.
Absolutely. Thanks for hanging out with us, and thanks for letting the silence be part of the conversation.
We'll see you next time on the English Medium Podcast.
Until then, maybe give your pocket a rest.